Hey guys, hope everyone is well. Thanks for joining us this evening. I'm really excited about this chat. I'm coming to you from the lands of the Wiradjuri people. I'm a Wiradjuri Wolgalu man. My name is Joe Williams, and really excited about this chat with Uncle Paul Callaghan about a book that's recently been released called The Dreaming Path through Pantera Press. It's a it's a beautiful book. You know, there's so many different things that are in this book, so many life takeaways that everyone can learn from about the old people, about our people, about the old people who have been here, that have walked the lands that you're on, no matter where you are in this country that we now call Australia, for thousands and thousands of years. So first, I'd like to acknowledge country, acknowledge the lands where you are on today. I'm brought to you by the Wiradjuri country. As I mentioned, I'm a Wiradjuri Wolgalu man, but living in Wiradjuri country, and I show my respects to the old people every single day. I don't just say that I pay my respects or that I am respectful. I do my best to show my respect every single day by acknowledging country, by acknowledging the footsteps that I walk in, because old people have been walking in these footsteps for thousands and thousands of years. So wherever you're joining from this evening, I'd like to acknowledge those old people for the path that they've laid for us all, that the footsteps that have been coming here for thousands and thousands of years, and show my respect to them old people, show my respect to the old people on your country today, the knowledge holders, the knowledge keepers, and the knowledge sharers, and all of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Nation people, wherever you are journeying from this evening. Thank you very much. I show my respect to your country, to you, to your people, and also the non-Indigenous brothers and sisters that are on this chat. We've got a real opportunity to learn from this book. As I mentioned, First Nation people have been here for thousands and thousands of years. That's now science documented. This is an opportunity to look into a little peek inside our world. And it's brought to you by a brilliant man, by two brilliant men, and I'm joined by one of those brilliant men tonight, Uncle Paul Callaghan. And the co-author on this book is another brilliant man, Uncle Paul Gordon, which I'm sure that Uncle Paul Callaghan will go into about the importance and the generosity and beauty of this man. But Uncle Paul Callaghan, thanks for joining us tonight. It's a really important read. I was lucky enough to be one of the people to run my eye over this thing, and once I picked it up, I just couldn't put it down. And as a First Nation man, I see the beauty in it, but I also see so much that so many people can live and learn from in this new book, The Dreaming Path. Tell us a little bit about, firstly, you, and then how you got to writing the book.
Thanks, Joe, and good evening, everybody. I'm not going to try and repeat Joe's beautiful acknowledgement. Joe, that was a beautiful acknowledgement, and I echo all your comments. And I will acknowledge country as well from wherever people may be listening from. Certainly with what I do, pre-COVID I travelled a lot of country, and not so much at the moment, but everywhere I go, when I enter country, I say a prayer to those old spirits, because for me they're still there and they're waiting for us to show our respects and to talk to them and let them know that we acknowledge their footsteps of the past. And that's really important, because I believe they still guide us, and I believe they're still with us. So I acknowledge all the different country where people may be tonight, and I acknowledge those old people. And even though we know the past 230 years hasn't been a particularly good story for many Aboriginal people and many other people as well, I have hope that that story can be reshaped, and that the spirits that are here in this land are waiting for that to be reshaped. And all of us coming together will enable that, and certainly this book will enable that too. So I acknowledge country, I acknowledge the old people present day, I acknowledge our future elders as well, and I acknowledge the non-Aboriginal people that are with us, that are wanting to listen to us, that are wanting to learn about culture. And when we talk about culture, it's much more than just culture, it's philosophy, it's spirituality, it's the spirituality of this land. And certainly it has been a great privilege for me to be able to to pull together 60,000 years of learning in some aspects into this book through the wisdom of Uncle Paul Gordon, who has been guiding me for well over 20 years now.
You know, I've got a little run sheet with notes and things that I probably should stick to, but something jumped out at me, and you know me too well to not stick to run sheets all that often. But you know, when we talk about culture, right? Everyone's got this absolute love and yearn for culture now, but a lot of people don't understand the depth of what culture is, and a lot of people may see culture as a beautiful art piece or a beautiful dance or a beautiful song, or, you know, or men and women dancing together in corroboree and, you know, out in the countryside. People think that that's what culture is. But something I learned very special from you and both yourself and Uncle Paul Gordon in the very early days is that the culture is so much more than that. It's more than just the practice that we see. It's very much the stories of the practice, which leads me directly into the first point that I made: living your best story and the importance of your story. Let's talk a little bit about that.
All right, well, a couple of things there. People might go and visit an Aboriginal site and they get blown away and go, wow, that's 20,000 years old, that artwork. That's so great. And it is, it's beautiful to think that there's been a hand there 20,000 years ago, or we've got engravings that are 50,000 years old. But it's about unpacking that. And this is what, as Aboriginal people, I think we're trying to do, those of us that have been given law and culture. It's to allow people to open up that gateway and go, okay, I can see that, but oh, wow, there's more to it. And as you said, Joe, it's about the story. Because when our people put those engravings into the stone, the petroglyphs, when they painted caves, they weren't walking through the bush and saying, oh, this is a bit dull here. There's not enough light. I think I need to put a painting here so it becomes a bit prettier. When these things are put into country, they're there as a story, and it's not just a fairy tale. It's not just a myth. Those stories are there as a source of learning to help us reflect on our life, even right to this day, to reflect on our life and go, wow, that resonates with me, that has meaning. I can use that, I can take that away. And certainly that's been my journey. I use everything I've been given over the last 25 years, every day of my life, as do you. And one of those really important quotes that we use that you've just mentioned, the old people say, when we leave this world behind, all we leave behind is our story, so make it the best story possible. And this is a challenge I'll put to everyone that's listening tonight. Are you living your best story possible? Or are you living a busy story? Because one of the reasons I wrote this book is that I love to watch what's going around me in terms of the beauty, but also in terms of where can I help communities and people, and even globally. Where can I help people start to see that there are better ways to live life and achieve contentment? And part of that, a story I have is Paul Gordon and myself, many years ago, we were sitting in a food court next to Central Railway Station. And we were watching all these people walk around going into all these tall buildings. And I noticed they were coated in grey. I call them the greys. They looked miserable. They looked stoic, but they looked beaten. And I said to Uncle Paul, look at all these people, they're grey. And he said, yeah, bro, I don't know why they want to live that way. Why would you want to live in grey? And I said, well, I tell you what, I've got something real colourful for us. We're going to go and get some Vietnamese pork rolls. I pointed to a little shop. And he said, never tried them. And I said, well, you're in for a treat. So we sat there eating these pork rolls. And if you could have taken a photograph of us spiritually, we were like this luminous colour shooting out of us because we were having the best time in the universe. Like, wow, how good's this? Looking at all these poor people walking around, coated in grey, going, you could see them look up at the building and virtually I could read their minds and they're going, only another 40 years and I can escape from this. So people, by and large, aren't living a good story. That doesn't mean that they're not good people doing their best. I got caught up in it in my mid-30s. where I was trying to be all things to all people at all times, the perfect worker, the perfect husband. And in doing that, I became consumed. And once I had my breakdown, which was a breakthrough in terms of my mental health, where I was suicidal and I thought, I can't cope with all this anxiety and depression. And I was told by the medical system I would never recover. So I was thinking I've got to opt out so that my family doesn't get bogged down with my problems. But when I recovered, I realised that I wasn't walking my footsteps and I wasn't living my story. And so I made a promise to myself, I will always respect other people, but I'm going to walk my footsteps. And that's the challenge I put to everybody, because from a spiritual point of view, as you know, Joe, our old people teach us, we are born in love, we are conceived in love, we live in love, and we go back to love. So our life is surrounded by love. So we are born perfect and we are born loved. We're on a journey of growth, of course, but we're loved. So all we have to do is follow our story, which is what the dreaming path means in terms of the book. The dreaming path is being on the dreaming path. It's always been there for us. But a lot of us aren't on it. And that's why we're not contented. So that's about us thinking about what is my story, and when I'm 100 years old and I look back, will I be happy with my story, or will my story be one of regret? And if it's one of regret, you think, the book provides you with wonderful insights from our old people that gives you tips and tricks on how do I get onto the dreaming path, how do I live my story? So with all this, you're not on your own.
You know, the beauty of you living your own story, and you touched on it a minute ago. The beauty of living your own story is living with authenticity. You know, as you know, I do a lot of work in the wellbeing space myself. So I'm out talking with people around, you know, communities around their wellbeing, around challenges that they're having mentally and emotionally, but they don't look at the challenges that they're having spiritually. You know, for so many people, why we aren't living with contentment and why we aren't living on that right path, the dreaming path as you call it, is because we're not living with authenticity. We have a world that lives where we're trying to be other people. We're trying to be someone else. We're trying to live like someone else. We always want something better. You know, that's where we start to fall down mentally and emotionally because we're not looking after ourselves spiritually. And, you know, one of the most important things that I've learned during my cultural journey as well, on the leadership of the men and women that I've been surrounded by, is caring for yourself, but caring for your place. You know, I talk so much about the 3 Ps: people, purpose, and place. When you care for people, when you look after people, you've got a community. When you care for your purpose, or we have a purpose, you have something greater and something bigger to work towards. And when you find your place, you find who you are in your identity. Talk to us about caring for your place, or how people can care for and identify their place.
100%. That's 100% important, because without our place, we have nothing and we're all dead. That's the bottom scientific understanding of this. We need to care for our place. And the cornerstone of the dreaming path, which is captured in a term called the 𝙏𝙝𝙚, and the 𝙏𝙝𝙚 is a word that in English translated means I must always care for my place and all things in my place. So the dreaming path, in essence, for 60,000 years, and there are different ways of saying it throughout Australia, of course, because we have diversity, but also we have unity underpinning that in terms of our caring for country and each other. So I must care for my place and all things in my place. People might go, oh, that's a bit cliched, what does that mean? But it's a really powerful commentary in terms of, if we all care for our place and all things in our place, then everything will be well. And so the essence of that is, in spirituality, the way our old people describe it is they say, the earth is my mother. She's my mother. We must respect our mother. And what they say is, if I care for my mother, if I learn about my mother, if I listen to my mother, if I dance for my mother, if I sing for my mother, if I do all those things for my mother, I will love my mother. And that's a really good thing, because I know if I do all those things for my mother and if I look after her, she will always give me what I need. And the way they explain that in terms of putting it into a human context is when an unborn baby is within a mother, that unborn baby doesn't have to worry every day about what's going on, what's this cord doing, and am I being fed? The mother cares and nurtures for that baby. And the way our old people describe Mother Earth is it's the same. And so we need to care for our place, and we need to think about that. And so every day we need to go out and think about country and what can I give back to country? And you think about COVID. What is it that people really, really missed when they were locked away all over the world? When they came out, they said, I missed the people I love, I missed my relationships. And I missed the outdoors, I missed fresh air, I missed country. And they're the two cornerstones, of course. And so tapping into what you said, our place is so important for us. And that gives us our purpose. And how we do that is in different ways. So caring for our place and all things in our place, we might be an accountant. We might be a nurse. We might be a social worker. We might be a policeman. We might be someone at the supermarket. They're all parts of the dreaming path that come together. And that taps into what you started with, Joe, when you talked about how we see artworks and we see all these things. It's the story underpinning those artworks that are so important. It's the story underpinning the dance. Why do we dance? We dance to remind ourselves to be humble and to care for our place, but also to share relationships and to share joy. Because being on this earth, the science says, if I flip a coin, there's a 1 in 2 chance it will be heads or tails. Winning the lottery, it's a 1 in 8 chance with a 1 in 2 chance with 8 noughts after it. Scientifically, the chance of being born is 1 in 6 with 100 noughts after it. 100 noughts. So it's like winning lotto 100 times. People will go, that's impossible, and yet we're born. That taps into our old ways, and that's something that intrigues me. Our old people will say, the scientists go, oh, yeah, this cultural stuff, it's nice, but it's very superficial. There's no proof. Every day there's more evidence to support what we do. And I was talking to an Aboriginal academic last year, and I was surprised and a bit disturbed when I said, oh, well, you know, for me, our culture and our arts and our dance, that's all integral to what's happening at a university. And he said, no, that's just entertainment. That's not serious stuff. And yet I've just finished a PhD. And the PhD has been really cathartic for me because I was able to research, because the research is out there and the evidence is out there, that for Aboriginal people, one of the reasons we're in such a state of trauma is because assimilation has taken us away from our cultural practice. And the research says without our cultural practice, we don't have our identity, and without identity, we can't have meaning, and without meaning, we can't have purpose. And we take that to a broader level in terms of what the book's about. As Aboriginal people, you and I both know, Joe, we want non-Aboriginal people to sit around the fire with us so they can be part of this country, because the law and the culture and the spirit belongs to the land. We just happen to be the ones that share the knowledge of the land so other people can sit in this land and feel what we feel and then really feel part of this land. And to me, that's what reconciliation is. And once we start doing that, then we can really start celebrating something that we might call Australia Day or Connection with the Land Day, where we are truly together. Because, as you know, Joe, the Aboriginal definition of health and well-being is we all must be well as the land. So if there is one person in our community that's not well, then none of us are well. And so for Aboriginal people, in some ways, even though we know in terms of the socio-economic indicators, we are in a place of disadvantage, we have our culture, and spiritually, we are kind of well compared to the non-Aboriginal Australians who may have all the money and the material possessions and things, but are spiritually hollow. So this is a gift that we're sharing so that we can all be well and all come together. And certainly that's the purpose of the book. And as I say, listening to the old people's ways that have been handed down to us, that connects with how we need to connect with the land, and then all things on the land.
It's so important, and you touched on it. You know, we're going to be out there living our best story. Now let's talk a little bit about stories. You know, the First Nation space, I will say, has really elevated within non-Indigenous people's thinking, right across the country, whether it be our arts, dance, clothing, you know, with trying to support First Nation brands, trying to support First Nation people, right? The interest around First Nation people has really elevated, in my opinion, right? Which talks directly to the next step that I think non-Indigenous people can go to, is start to learn a little bit about us in depth, right? So when we talk about our stories, when we talk about our old dreaming stories, this is what people don't understand when you go across the country and you're talking to them about stories, that all of our place, everything in our place has story. Those stories are beautiful. Those stories have been taught in kindergarten since I was, you know, a young fella. Maybe you're only 2 or 3 years older than me, Uncle Paul, so I'm not quite sure if you got the same stories, but those dreaming stories were simply beautiful, but we view them as just that, as stories, as fairy tales, as something that we look at and pretty and go, oh, wow, that's a beautiful story. What people don't understand, non-Indigenous people don't understand, and what I invite them to look at a little bit deeper, is the values underneath the story. Right, so you look at, I refer to 2 stories all the time. 𝙏𝙏𝙚 the frog, the big greedy frog that drank up all the water, and how the birds got their colours. Right, the two very important stories that a lot of people have connected to and know about those stories. What people don't understand is that 𝙏𝙏𝙚 the frog wasn't just about a big frog who drank up all the water. 𝙏𝙏𝙚 the frog has the underlying and values in the stories that underpin what helps us to be well. The values of things like 𝙏𝙏𝙚 the frog was about greed. You know, we've got too many people looking at life through the lens of greed, what we can have, what we want. How the birds got their colours wasn't particularly a story about beautiful birds and how bright in their colours they were. It was a story about how the crow didn't help the other birds, so he didn't get any other colours. So again, 2 stories with deeply underlying values that impact our well-being, right? So for a long time, non-Indigenous people have seen these stories of, yeah, just fables, fairy tales, but there's a deeper underlying values that underpin who we are as Aboriginal people. Let's talk a little bit about values, gratitude, and how they impact our relationship, you know, values in how they impact our healing. You know, let's talk about values and the stories of the values that are in our stories.
Yeah, really interesting that you would say that, Joe. This has been validated with Pantera Press, who have published this book, because they said to me, we'd love you and Uncle Paul to write a book. And we said, okay. So Paul and I met with Pantera 2 years ago now. And we were just talking about stuff because I knew we had all the content, but I wasn't quite sure on the structure or the shape, which is why I was really, really excited about having a publisher, because I knew they would have the expertise on what is the best way to get our story out there? What's the best way to get our message out there? So we sat and we yarned for quite a while over Zoom, because COVID was just starting. And we're talking, and then I said to Pantera, so how do you think we should structure all these things that we have to say and to share to help people? And I was absolutely almost gobsmacked and speechless. One of the publishers, she said, I've been listening. She said, I think we should start every chapter with a Dreamtime story. And I've gone, you're kidding me. Wow, we're going to write this book that we want to change the world with. And you've picked up, without us pushing it, just by hearing us talk, you've picked up that you think a nice intro would be a Dreamtime story. And then we get into the real world contemporary stuff, which shows they were an objective third party that knew nothing about culture at all, just knew that it's something that needs to be shared. And that's what they said. And Paul said, oh, yeah, we can do that. And so that's why now, if anyone does get the book from Booktopia, you'll see that under each chapter, it opens up with a Dreamtime story. And that's because our stories are multi-layered. So you know this, Joe, too. There might be, and it's not in the book, but we'll hear stories in our communities about the little hairy men, the Yuri. And so when you're kids, you'll hear about those little hairy men, watch out, they'll get you. And then as you get older, depending on what you do and where you go in your life, you'll be given another insight. And then there'll be another layer, and then there'll be another layer of meaning. So these stories are there to promote conversation about just what you've said the values. For instance, the last chapter in The Dreaming Path is about leadership, and people might think, what are Aboriginal people talking about leadership? Our people have been leading for 60,000 years. And I actually wrote a Dreamtime story about leadership, which is a commentary on what's wrong with leadership in the world today. And the story is all about a young lizard that challenges all the elders and says, I'm sick of all this old school, I'm going to lead. And the elders say, off you go. And off he goes. And that's the Dreamtime story. And it doesn't turn out very well because he's forgotten all the old ways. So that's there to then open up a conversation about what is true leadership. And true leadership in today's world, from an Aboriginal perspective, is far too tunnel vision and far too narrow. A leader in today's world is constrained by their boss and by their position description and by what surrounds them in terms of their revenue. Whereas in an Aboriginal perspective, a true leader makes decisions holistically for the greater good of country and all things on country. So the people, the place and the animals and the country itself. And not only for the now, as you know, Joe, our old people as leaders make decisions on behalf of their children's 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 children. So there's an example there of the Dreamtime story that says, wow, hey, listen, you mob, you're not leading properly. So all these other stories, yeah, you've mentioned greed, and there are other cornerstone values. So love, respect, humility, and always share. They're in all of our Dreamtime stories. So we're born in love, and we must always love. And in the traditional Aboriginal world, we know there are 500 languages or more. And in all of that, there is not one word for hate. Now, what does that tell you? Have a think about it. We didn't go, oh, we're just dumb, we don't have a word for hate. We didn't have a word for hate because it didn't exist, because we had ways of managing conflict so that anger didn't escalate into hatred. So we must always love all things, but also know that we're loved. We're loved by the old spirits behind us. We're loved by the mother. Love, respect, always treat each other with respect, but we don't. Part of that, what I've seen as an observer of life, where does that come from? Well, from when we go to school, instead of being united and respecting each other, we're given a mandate to fight each other, to battle. It's a state of battle because we're battling to be the top of the class. Then we go to year 12 and they're saying, you've got to get a good UAC or UAI, whatever it is to get into uni, you need to be the best. So we battle each other. Then we go into uni and we're battling each other in classes. Then we go into the job market and what do we go through? A competitive merit-based selection process. We're competing, the word's there, we've got to fight each other. And then I've got a degree in accounting. I used to be a lecturer in economics. What is the Western world underpinned by? The competitive market. We must have supply and demand. We must compete. So the Western world is one of competition and fighting. The Aboriginal world is, hey, we'll sit down and share because there's plenty. And in doing this book, I researched it. There's 7.7 billion people in the world. There are enough resources to enable all of us to live a comfortable life. So we have what we need, and traditionally we had that too. We're just not finding the will and the way to distribute that in a wise way. So love, respect and sharing and humility. You think about that, I'm going for a job, what am I taught? I've got to really tap dance and show how good I am. I've got to be full of ego. If I want to have my product on the market, and consumerism drives us everywhere, that drives us mad, but consumerism drives the economy, I've got to stand out. So the whole world is one of, oh, I must stand out. So it's taking us down the wrong path. We can share and be united. So whenever I share time with someone who's a bit troubled, I go through love, respect, humility and sharing. And invariably we'll find something there where a person isn't focused on those things and they've missed the point. And I'll do it. If I'm troubled in my life, I'll go back and I'll go, gee, I'm angry. I might not be respecting myself. I might not be loving myself. I might not be humble, or I'm doing it against someone else. So those values are so important as a guide for all of us.
You touched on something super important, which will drag me directly into the next topic, which is facing life's problems, life's challenges, life's storms. I believe, and this is because of the teaching of people like yourself and Uncle Paul Gordon and, you know, the old people, is that we aren't living with these values enough. You know, when we are challenged by different things, it's because we aren't living with certain things in our life. Let's talk about how the dreaming path and the different sections throughout the dreaming path in helping people firstly identify, and then, because we all have challenges, right? We all have challenges, and those challenges overwhelm us at times. But sometimes we can't identify what the actual challenge is. We just feel irk. We don't feel great. So we don't actually know what it is. How can the dreaming path help people get through life's challenges?
There are kind of two aspects of that. When we're just feeling generally my view is that we're not on the dreaming path. We've been sidetracked. And so we're born with a purpose to do things. And deep inside, with our intuitive self, our spiritual self, our wise self, we know that. We know if we're not in our zone. And so that's okay for a little while, because we have to do things that aren't necessarily what we think we should be doing, because that's life. But if we do it for too long, we get taken away from it. And so my view is, when we're starting to feel a bit like not connected and I'm just not happy with life, that's a wonderful time to sit back and reflect and say, what is my story? And when I'm 100, how do I want that to read? And how is it reading now? And what's missing? And what do I need to reshape? And that takes courage. So that's one aspect. But also, the other really important thing to think about from our culture is, when we sit on a mountain, let's pretend we're a really big tree. And now we're hundreds of feet high. We're the biggest tree on the top of this mountain. We're looking all over the forest, all of our brothers and sisters. It's beautiful. And then we see a storm coming. Now, it would be folly for me to think that storm's not going to come, because storms come. So there's no point in me as a tree saying, where'd that storm come from? I didn't order that. This is really bad. So number one, storms are going to come in our life. Sometimes they're expected, but a lot of the times they're not. So it's about understanding these things are going to come, whether I like it or not. So rather than begrudge them, I've got to go, okay, how do I prepare for these storms of life? And then let's imagine you're that tree and the storm's coming, and you go, that's all right, I'm a big tree. And then you go, oh, wait there. I'm on a rocky hill here. My roots aren't very deep and I don't have many. What am I going to do? So then you're going to freak out and go, this storm's going to knock me over. That's us as human beings in life. If we live this superficial life of running around chasing the clock, chasing the money, chasing the power, chasing the prestige, and not going deeper into spirituality, or it doesn't have to be spirituality for people that are freaked out by spirituality. It could be philosophy about my life and whether I have a life of contentment. They're your roots. You've got to put those roots down, and they're your values. Your soil is your nurture and all the things that give you sustenance. So that's looking after yourself. It's doing meditation. It's exercising. But then your roots are your values, and your values need to be owned by you, not everybody else telling you what to do. And that's what happens as we grow up. And so you need those deep roots. But also, when the storm comes, if you stand and say, I'm going to face this storm with gritted teeth, the chances are that storm will snap you off. You need to be able to bend with those winds. You need to be able to flow. And that's a key part of our way of living. For Aboriginal people, we lived with the heartbeat of the land. We flowed. We didn't fight the land. We didn't say, that drought can't come here. We read all the signs, and we knew where the food would be at certain times of the year, and we knew the seasons. We flowed. So in life, we need to be able to flow and not fight. And then also recognise in terms of our mindset, and you and I do a lot of work in this, Joe, in terms of it's our attitude that helps us through these tough times. When we face a storm, what do we say to ourselves when that is happening? Now, in terms, we all have storms. Some of these storms, you kind of mentioned, Joe, they're around us, but we don't know we're in all this cloud. And that's when we're off our dreaming path and we've got to go, okay, I need to own this. So what is it I need to do to get back on track? And if we're not careful, what we can do is we can become victims and start blaming everything around us, saying everyone's against me and I'm not doing the work I want to do. But it's up to us to own it and say, okay, I'm going to walk through this and find me. And when I do that, I know there'll be other people around me to help me in this storm. But then with those storms that are there like the tree, and we all have them, I've certainly had a number of storms. I had a breakdown in my 30s, but it turned out to be a breakthrough. In 2013, I was the most senior Aboriginal public servant in New South Wales, and I thought, wow, this is my next 10 years helping our mob. But I found out I couldn't do anything to help anybody, so I took a leap of faith in that storm and I started my own business. And now I do things that I never dreamed of being given the chance to do that are all about what I'm about, which is both of us well-being. A couple of years ago, the biggest tragedy that happened to me was I lost my brother. I was there when he took his last breath. Now, I'll never get over that storm. And so sometimes there are storms that we just have to go, well, that was just a storm. That was a cyclone. But it did give me an insight into I need to make the most of every day for my brother Billy because he's not here. But I am, and he wanted to stay. But I am, so instead of me looking around me and saying, gee, I haven't got this and I haven't got that, what I'll do is look at what I have got and say, yeah, I'm here and I can share and I can be humble and respectful and help others through my learning. And in recent times, one of my sons was making boomerangs and nearly severed his hand. The surgeon said he was 2 mils from dying in front of me. But the thankfulness I had from that was this amazing medical system. So with this book, it's not saying that everything is bad in the Western world. It's saying there are really good things. But here is some other stuff that you can learn from as well so that you can make the most of your story. So that's about facing the storms in our life. The storms will come, Joe. But remember, there's always the sun, that old grandmother sun above the storms. And the storms are part of giving us water and cleansing us. So there's something we can learn from. And the old people say, when we're going through a hard time, they'll go, well, this is happening because you're ready to grow, you're ready to learn. So sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes when things are getting a bit rough, I'll go, okay, what can I learn from this? And then I'll look back and I'll go, well, that speed bump I had, I'm glad that happened because it reminded me to be humble. And they're the ways that I approach life that are in the book that I think can help all people, not just Aboriginal people, but all people.
Uncle Paul Callaghan, it's been not just a pleasure to sit and chat with you about this brilliant book, The Dreaming Path, but I remember something that I speak about. I speak about two conversations that I have, and as you know, I'm in the wellbeing space as well, but I talk about conversations and two really important conversations that ever happened to me were both by yourself and Uncle Paul Gordon. And both are very, very applicable to this conversation. You know, Uncle Paul Gordon, he said to me, Joe, I love the work that you do in the wellbeing space, but how you heal yourself is out on country. He said, I'm going to challenge some of the things that you've been taught and told about what's wrong with you. And I won't say that you're mentally sick, I'll say that you're spiritually sick. You need to heal your spirit to get well. And it talked directly to a conversation again that I had with you where you sat down with me on country, and I remember it like it was yesterday. Close to 10 years ago, and I remember it like it was yesterday. And you said, Joe, what you learn out here on country, what you learn from these special old people, from these special old ways, you implement them into your life, and your mental health problems will all but go away. And I can honestly say, hand on heart, that any time that I'm not well, I reflect on the lessons that I've learned. from both yourself and Uncle Paul Gordon. And many of those lessons are filtered throughout this brilliant book encapsulated in The Dreaming Path. Uncle Paul, it's been a pleasure, an absolute pleasure to talk with you and having you on Booktopia TV. Thanks for joining us. Thanks everyone for all of our viewers that joined us. Hope you got some much needed knowledge and wisdom out of this brilliant chat. Hope you've enjoyed the discussion. You can get your copy of The Dreaming Path, which is published by Pantera Press, in the description right now from booktopia.com.au. Uncle Paul, thank you so much for this conversation. And thank you so much for penning these beautiful words that I believe will have a massive impact, not just on this country, but to people around the globe. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Joe. It's been a pleasure.